My name is Steve, and I am a 32-year-old marketing executive in Chicago. I spent weeks planning what I thought would be the perfect family reunion at an upscale restaurant downtown. Over $2,000 for 20 people, all coming out of my pocket. I arrived early that Saturday, excitement bubbling in my chest after months of careful planning. But as I walked through the door, my heart sank. The large table I had reserved sat completely empty. An hour later, my mother finally arrived alone, laughing as she handed me a plastic container. "We brought you some leftovers. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and subscribe to hear how I finally stood up for myself after years of being taken advantage of." Growing up as the middle child in a family of 5 was never easy, with my older brother James getting attention for being the firstborn and my younger sister Sarah being the baby of the family. I often found myself stuck in the thankless position of being the responsible one. My parents, especially my mother, always relied on me to be the mediator, the helper, the one who would step up when things got tough. This pattern followed me into adulthood, where despite my success, my family still saw me as just the reliable middle child. I had built a solid career in marketing over the past decade. After starting as an intern right out of college, I worked my way up to becoming an executive at one of Chicago's top firms. My apartment overlooked Lake Michigan. I had a decent savings account, and for the first time, I felt truly proud of what I had accomplished. Yet whenever I shared my achievements with my family, they would give me a polite nod before quickly changing the subject to whatever new thing James or Sarah was doing. Last spring, I received a substantial promotion that came with a corner office and a team of my own to manage. This milestone sparked something in me, a desire to finally bridge the gap between my success in the professional world and the recognition I still craved from my family. I thought that perhaps by bringing everyone together for a reunion, I could finally earn their respect and attention. The planning process began 3 months in advance. I researched dozens of venues before settling on Maison Laurent, an upscale French restaurant with private dining rooms and a renowned chef. I wanted everything to be perfect, from the menu to the seating arrangements. I even created a spreadsheet to track everyone's food preferences and dietary restrictions. Financially, this was a significant sacrifice. I had originally planned to use that money for a vacation to Italy, something I had been looking forward to for years. Instead, I put in extra hours at work to afford the hefty deposit the restaurant required. But in my mind, it would be worth it to see my family gathered together, acknowledging the effort I had made. Each time I called a family member to inform them about the reunion, I was met with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. "That sounds wonderful, Steve," my Aunt Patricia had said. "Count us in." My brother James mentioned bringing his new girlfriend, whom nobody had met yet. My sister Sarah talked about how long it had been since we all got together. I put careful thought into personal touches for each attendee. For my dad, I made sure the restaurant would serve his favorite bourbon. For my cousin Jennifer, who was celebrating her graduation, I ordered a special cake. I even arranged for the restaurant to accommodate my Uncle Bob, who was recovering from knee surgery, with a comfortable chair and extra space. The last time our whole family had gathered was for my grandfather's 70th birthday, 5 years ago. It had been a joyful occasion, with laughter, stories, and a sense of genuine connection. Since then, family gatherings had become increasingly rare as people moved away, started families of their own, or simply grew apart. I yearned to recreate that feeling of belonging and warmth. 2 weeks before the reunion, I had a phone conversation with my mother that bolstered my confidence. "Everyone is looking forward to it," she assured me. "It has been too long since we all got together." Her words validated my efforts and fueled my anticipation. As the date approached, I found myself daydreaming about healing old family rifts. Perhaps my brother and I could finally move past that argument we had at Christmas 2 years ago. Maybe my sister would stop seeing me as competition for our parents' attention and recognize me as an ally. I imagined my parents beaming with pride as they told their friends about their successful son who had treated the entire family to a gourmet dinner. The night before the reunion, I could barely sleep from excitement. I had just one more day until my vision of a perfect family gathering would become reality. I had no idea that instead, I was about to learn one of the most painful lessons of my life. The first sign that things might not go as planned came 3 days before the reunion. My cousin Thomas, who had initially sounded enthusiastic, sent a text message claiming that his boss had suddenly scheduled him for weekend work. "Sorry, man, you know how it is," he wrote. "Gotta pay the bills." I was disappointed but understood that work obligations sometimes came up unexpectedly. I replied with a gracious message, telling him we would miss him, but maybe next time. The following day, my Uncle Richard and Aunt Patricia called to inform me that they had somehow double-booked themselves and would not be able to make it either. "We completely forgot about the neighborhood block party," Aunt Patricia explained, her voice tinged with what I perceived as genuine regret. "We already promised to bring our famous potato salad." Again, I hid my disappointment and assured them it was fine. I immediately called the restaurant to adjust the reservation from 20 to 17 people. That same evening, my brother James texted me with a vague message about possibly being late to the reunion. When I called to get more details, he seemed evasive, mentioning something about helping a friend move but that he would try his best to make it. The uncertainty in his voice made me uneasy, but I convinced myself that even if he was late, he would still show up eventually. Then came the conversation with my mother that should have been a clear warning sign. "Steve, honey," she said during our weekly phone call, "do you think that restaurant might be a bit too fancy for a family get-together? Your father feels uncomfortable in places where he needs to use 3 different forks." I reassured her that Maison Laurent, despite its reputation, was quite accommodating and that the private dining room would give us plenty of space to be ourselves without worrying about other patrons. As cancellations continued to trickle in, I found myself making accommodations for everyone. When my sister Sarah mentioned that parking downtown was a concern, I offered to pick her up. When my cousin Jennifer worried about the dress code, I told her casual attire would be fine despite the upscale venue. I was determined to remove any obstacle that might prevent my family from attending. With each new cancellation, I had to make another embarrassing call to the restaurant manager, Mr. DuPont. "Mr. Wagner, this is the 4th adjustment to your reservation," he noted with a hint of irritation in his voice. "We prepare staffing based on party size, you understand." I apologized profusely and assured him that the remaining 13 guests were confirmed. 5 days before the event, my sister Sarah called me. "I promise I will be there," she said, but something in her tone suggested hesitation. "It is just that I have been so busy with the kids lately." Sarah had 2 young children, aged 4 and 6, whom I had offered to include in the reservation despite the additional cost. "Bring them along," I had insisted. "I want the whole family there." The day before the reunion, I stopped by my parents' house to remind them about the time and location. As I approached the front door, I overheard my mother on the phone, seemingly talking to my brother. "Yes, Steve is still going ahead with it," she was saying. "I do not know what to." She abruptly stopped when she noticed me entering and quickly ended the call. When I asked who she was talking to, she casually replied, "Oh, just your aunt asking about tomorrow." Something did not add up, but I pushed the suspicion aside. That evening, I noticed increased activity in our family text threads. Messages about weekend plans were being exchanged, but curiously, none mentioned the reunion I had planned. When I chimed in with a reminder about tomorrow's gathering, the thread suddenly went quiet. After 30 minutes with no responses, my sister finally replied with a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. Despite these warning signs, I remained optimistic. I spent the evening shopping for small gifts for each attendee, a bottle of cologne for my dad, a scarf for my mom, and various items for others that I thought they might appreciate as tokens of my affection. I carefully wrapped each one and placed them in a large bag to bring to the restaurant. That night, I had trouble sleeping. When I finally did drift off, I had an unsettling dream about sitting alone at a large table in an empty restaurant. I woke up at dawn, brushing off the dream as simple pre-event anxiety. "Today is going to be perfect," I told myself as I got out of bed, unaware of just how prophetic that dream would turn out to be. The morning of the reunion, I woke up early and spent extra time getting ready. I chose my best suit, a charcoal gray ensemble that I typically reserved for important client meetings. I polished my shoes until I could see my reflection in them and carefully styled my hair. I wanted to look successful, but not like I was trying too hard. A balance I had perfected over years of navigating professional settings. I arrived at Maison Laurent 45 minutes before the scheduled start time of 1 o'clock. Mr. Dupont greeted me at the door with a professional nod and led me to the private dining room at the back of the restaurant. The room was elegantly set with a long table that could accommodate the 13 guests I was now expecting. Crisp white tablecloths, gleaming silverware, and crystal glasses created an atmosphere of sophisticated warmth. "Would you like to make any adjustments to the seating arrangement?" Mr. Dupont asked. I took a few minutes to place the name cards I had created, positioning my parents at one end of the table, my siblings and their families in the middle, and various relatives filling in the remaining seats. I had put considerable thought into who would sit next to whom, taking into account long-standing family dynamics and conversation compatibility. After arranging the place settings, I distributed the small wrapped gifts at each person's spot. I had spent nearly $300 on these tokens, another expense on top of the meal itself, but I believed they would add a personal touch that would be appreciated. I then set up a small playlist of background music, classic jazz that my father enjoyed, on a portable speaker I had brought. By 12:45, everything was perfect and ready for my family's arrival. I sat down at my place at the head of the table and checked my phone. No messages yet, which I took as a good sign. People were probably on their way and focused on driving rather than texting. 1 o'clock came and went. At 1:15, I received the first cancellation of the day. My sister Sarah sent a text. "Car trouble, battery dead. Trying to find someone to jump it. Will be late." I replied immediately, offering to send her a ride-share service, but she didn't respond. I made a mental note to rearrange the seating if she arrived late. By 1:30, I started receiving more messages. My cousin Jennifer claimed her cat was sick and needed emergency vet attention. My Uncle Bob's knee pain had apparently flared up. My father texted that he and Mom might be running a bit behind without specifying how late they would be. With each message, my heart sank a little more, but I maintained hope that at least some family members would show up. At 2 o'clock, a full hour after the scheduled start time, I was still sitting alone at the large table. The waiter had come by several times, his expression growing increasingly sympathetic with each visit. "Perhaps a drink while you wait, sir," he suggested. I ordered a scotch, neat, and sipped it slowly, checking my phone every few minutes. From my seat, I could hear the hushed conversations of the restaurant staff just outside the private room. "Poor guy," one of them whispered. "Still waiting all alone." Their pity stung almost as much as my family's absence. I pretended not to notice, maintaining my composure even as embarrassment burned through me. At 2:30, I opened social media on my phone and froze. There, in my feed, was a post from my brother James. It showed him at a baseball game, hot dog in one hand and beer in the other, clearly having a great time with friends. The timestamp indicated it had been posted 20 minutes ago. The caption read, "Nothing better than a Saturday at the ballpark." I stared at the screen, a cold realization washing over me. James had never intended to come to the reunion. I began calling family members directly instead of texting. Call after call went straight to voicemail. It was as if they were all deliberately avoiding me. With each unanswered call, the truth became clearer and more painful. My father, my sister, my cousins, none of them were coming. At 3 o'clock, Mr. Dupont approached me with an uncomfortable expression. "Mr. Wagner, I'm terribly sorry, but we will need to begin serving the food soon or it will lose its quality. Would you perhaps like us to package it for you to take home?" The reality of the situation hit me fully at that moment. I was going to be paying for a 13-person gourmet meal that no one would be eating. I excused myself and went to the restroom, locking myself in a stall as waves of humiliation washed over me. I had spent $2,300 on this meal, not including the gifts. It represented months of saving and overtime work. More than the money, though, I had invested emotional energy and hope into this gathering, believing it would finally bring me the connection and recognition I craved from my family. After composing myself, I splashed cold water on my face and returned to the dining room. I informed Mr. DuPont that I would indeed like the food package to go, though I had no idea what I would do with 13 gourmet meals. As the kitchen staff began preparing the takeout containers, I sat alone at the grand table, surrounded by empty chairs and unclaimed gifts, coming to terms with what was clearly a coordinated rejection by my entire family. At precisely 3:45, nearly 3 hours after the scheduled start time, the door to the private dining room opened. I looked up, a pathetic spark of hope flaring briefly, to see my mother walking in alone. She was dressed casually in jeans and a light sweater, not the semi-formal attire I had suggested for the occasion. Under her arm was a large plastic container, the kind used for storing leftovers. "Oh, Steve," she said, her tone oddly cheerful given the circumstances. "You are still here? I thought you would have left by now." There was no trace of apology in her voice, no acknowledgement of the fact that an entire family had stood me up at an event I had spent thousands of dollars organizing. I stood to greet her, struggling to keep my composure. "Mom, what happened? Where is everyone? Dad? Sarah? I have been sitting here for almost 3 hours." My voice cracked slightly, despite my best efforts to appear calm. She waved her hand dismissively as she set the plastic container on the table. "Oh, there was a change of plans. I thought you knew." She popped the lid off the container, revealing what appeared to be homemade potato salad and some fried chicken. "We brought you some leftovers from the gathering." "What gathering?" I asked, the words coming out more sharply than I intended. My mother looked at me with an expression that mixed surprise and something that seemed almost like pity. "The family get-together at James's house. It was more casual. You know how your father hates fancy places. We tried calling you but couldn't get through." This was an obvious lie, as my phone had been in my hand most of the afternoon, and I had received no calls from her or anyone else in the family. The truth crashed down on me with stunning clarity. There had been a family reunion today, but I hadn't been invited. While I sat alone in this expensive restaurant, my entire family had been gathered at my brother's house, eating, laughing, and enjoying each other's company. "Why wasn't I told about this change?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. My mother shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "Well, honey, everyone thought this place was a bit much. Showing off, you know? James suggested we keep it simple, like we always do. We took a family vote and decided his backyard would be better." "A family vote? When was this vote? Why wasn't I included?" She fiddled with her purse strap. "It was last week in the family chat. I guess you weren't in that group message. James probably forgot to add you." The revelation struck me like a physical blow. Not only had my family deliberately chosen not to attend my carefully planned reunion, but they had actively organized an alternative event behind my back, excluding me from both the planning and the celebration itself. This wasn't a series of unfortunate coincidences or last-minute emergencies. This was a coordinated rejection. As I stood there absorbing this betrayal, memories of similar incidents throughout my childhood surfaced with painful clarity. My 10th birthday party, when most of the family had forgotten and gone to my cousin's soccer game instead. My high school graduation, where my parents had left immediately after the ceremony to attend James's baseball tournament, missing the honors reception where I received an award. Pattern after pattern of being overlooked, minimized, and taken for granted. My mother's phone chimed with a text message. As she checked it, I caught a glimpse of a group chat I had never seen before, titled "Family Matters." The visible message was from James. "Is he still upset? We saved him some cake if he wants to come over now. Can I see your phone for a second?" I asked, surprising myself with the calmness in my voice. My mother hesitated, then handed it over with a nervous laugh. "Your brother wants to know if you are coming over now." I scrolled through the group chat, my stomach clenching tighter with each message I read. There were photos from today's gathering, dozens of them, showing my entire family crowded into James's backyard. My father at the grill, my sister playing with her kids in the sprinkler, aunts and uncles and cousins, all the people who had claimed to be busy, sick, or otherwise unable to attend my event. But what hurt most were the messages from 3 weeks ago, when the alternative plan had first been suggested. "Steve's fancy restaurant thing sounds uncomfortable," my brother had written. "Let's just do it at my place instead, and not tell him until last minute." The responses had rolled in, everyone agreeing that my plan was too much and that I was just trying to show off again. While I was scrolling, my mother's phone rang. She reached for it, but I held up my hand, asking for a moment as I continued reading. She answered anyway, putting it on speaker perhaps by mistake. James's voice filled the private dining room. "Mom, did you find him? Is he still upset?" "I am right here, James," I said, my voice unnaturally calm. There was a pause then. "Oh, hey, bro. Look, no hard feelings, right? You are always doing that fancy stuff that makes everyone uncomfortable. We just wanted something chill. You can still come over. We have plenty of food left." Before I could respond, my mother took the phone and switched it off speaker, turning slightly away as she continued the conversation in hushed tones. The restaurant staff, who had been discreetly packaging food nearby, were clearly witnessing my humiliation, their expressions a mix of second-hand embarrassment and pity. My internal emotional turmoil had reached a breaking point, a chaotic mix of hurt, betrayal, anger, and an odd sense of clarity. This moment, as painful as it was illuminating years of family dynamics I had been too close to see clearly. When my mother ended her call, she turned to me with a placating smile. "Steve, honey, you are taking this way too seriously. It was just a little change of plans, not a personal attack. You have always been so sensitive about everything. Learn to take a joke." Then came what would prove to be the final straw. As if the day hadn't been devastating enough, my mother casually added, "By the way, Jennifer is getting married in October, and the family is trying to pull together some money to help with the wedding. Since you are doing so well with your fancy job and obviously have money to spend on expensive restaurants, we were hoping you could contribute. Maybe $5,000? Everyone else is pitching in what they can." In that moment, something broke and reformed within me. Years of being the family ATM, the reliable one who would always come through financially while receiving nothing but dismissal in return, crystallized into perfect clarity. I finally understood exactly what I meant to my family. As my mother stood there, seemingly oblivious to the magnitude of what had just transpired, I made a decision that would fundamentally change my relationship with my family forever. Instead of exploding with the anger and hurt that was roiling inside me, I maintained a calm exterior. Years of navigating difficult client meetings had taught me how to hide my true emotions when necessary. "I see," I said simply, signaling to Mr. DuPont that I was ready for the check. When he brought it over, I reviewed the total, $2,342 for food that would largely go to waste, and added a $500 tip for the staff who had been so patient and kind throughout this humiliating experience. "Steve, are you not coming to James's house?" my mother asked, watching me sign the credit card slip. "Everyone is waiting to see you." I turned to her with a polite smile that did not reach my eyes. "I have some work to catch up on this evening. Please give everyone my best." My voice was steady, betraying none of the emotional turmoil beneath the surface. "Well, can you at least drive me back?" "I took an Uber here." She gathered her purse, clearly expecting me to comply as I always had. "I think I am going to stay and have another drink," I replied. "Perhaps you could call another Uber? Or ask James to pick you up?" For the first time in my adult life, I was not dropping everything to accommodate a family member's request. The brief flash of surprise in my mother's eyes confirmed that this small act of self-preservation was already a departure from our established dynamic. She frowned slightly but nodded. "All right then, I will see you at Sunday dinner next week." "I will let you know," I said non-committally. Another first, I had never before declined the standing family dinner invitation. After my mother left, I sat alone at the bar of Maison Laurent, nursing a scotch and processing the day's events. The staff had packed all the prepared food into containers, which now sat in my car. I had already decided to donate most of it to a nearby homeless shelter, saving just enough for myself for dinner. The drive home was a blur, my mind racing with profound realizations about my family dynamics. As I entered my apartment, I felt both utterly drained and strangely clear-headed. Instead of collapsing into self-pity as I might have in the past, I sat down at my computer and opened a spreadsheet. Over the next 3 hours, I methodically documented every instance of financial support I had provided to my family members over the past decade. The loans that were never repaid, the gifts that had been demanded rather than requested, the emergency bailouts that somehow always seem to coincide with vacations or new purchases by the recipients. $5,000 for my brother's car after he crashed his previous one while driving intoxicated. $3,000 for my sister when she wanted to renovate her kitchen. Countless smaller amounts to cousins, aunts, and uncles for everything from medical bills to travel expenses. The total was staggering, over $30,000 in just the past 5 years alone, not including today's wasted reunion expense. None of the major loans had ever been repaid, always dismissed with comments like, "We're family, we don't keep score," whenever I gently brought them up. As I stared at the numbers, I realized that I had been functioning as my family's unofficial bank, providing financial support whenever asked, while receiving nothing in return, not even basic respect or consideration. The spreadsheet was a stark visual representation of a one-sided relationship that had been draining me financially and emotionally for years. I picked up my phone and called my friend Marcus, the one person who had consistently given me honest feedback about my family situation. "They did what?" he exclaimed, after I recounted the day's events. "Steve, man, that is beyond disrespectful. That is actively cruel." "I know," I admitted, finally allowing myself to acknowledge the truth. "I think I have been in denial about my family for a long time." "So what are you going to do about it?" Marcus asked. His directness was exactly what I needed at that moment. "I am not sure yet," I replied, "but I know I can't keep doing what I have been doing." After we hung up, I spent the evening researching topics I had never allowed myself to fully explore before, setting healthy boundaries with family, recognizing toxic family dynamics, and breaking cycles of financial abuse. The articles and forums I found were illuminating, filled with stories that mirrored my own experiences with unsettling accuracy. By midnight, I had made a decision. I would not cut off my family entirely, but I would fundamentally change how I engaged with them, particularly regarding money. I opened my laptop again and began drafting a message to send to the family group chat, the one I had just learned existed without me. I wrote and rewrote the message several times, careful to make it firm but not emotional, clear but not accusatory. I wanted to establish boundaries without burning bridges, to stand up for myself without seeming vindictive. After much consideration, I settled on a simple but powerful statement. I was disappointed to miss seeing everyone today. I have realized that my financial support has been taken for granted. From now on, all expenses, loans, and financial requests will be formally invoiced with payment terms and expectations clearly stated. I hope we can build a more balanced relationship moving forward. I knew that, from now on, all expenses will be invoiced would likely cause an uproar in my family, who had grown accustomed to treating my resources as communal property. But it was a necessary line in the sand, one that I should have drawn years ago. With a deep breath, I pressed send, then immediately turned off my phone. I didn't want to deal with the inevitable flood of angry responses tonight. As I placed my silent phone on the nightstand, I felt a surprising sense of liberation, as if a weight I had been carrying for decades had suddenly been lifted. For the first time in my adult life, I had prioritized my own well-being over my family's expectations, and despite the pain of the day, it felt remarkably right. The next morning, I turned my phone back on to find it immediately buzzing with notifications. As expected, my message to the family chat had created quite the storm. There were 27 text messages, 13 missed calls, and several voicemails waiting for me. I took a deep breath and began sorting through them. The responses fell into predictable patterns. My brother James had sent a series of increasingly angry texts. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Followed by, "You can't be serious," and finally, "Mom is crying because of you. Hope you're happy." My sister Sarah had taken a more passive-aggressive approach. "I always knew you resented helping family. Sorry, we're such a burden on your perfect life." My father, typically a man of few words, had left a surprisingly long voicemail, his voice gruff with what sounded like embarrassment mixed with indignation. "Son, this invoice business is ridiculous. Family helps family without keeping score. Your mother is very upset. Call her and apologize." There were also messages from extended family members, most expressing shock or disappointment at my sudden change in attitude. Cousin Jennifer, whose wedding I had just been asked to help fund, sent a particularly guilt-laden text about how she had been counting on my generosity and how hurt she was by my selfishness. What surprised me, however, was a private message from my Uncle Bob, my mother's brother and someone I had always felt a quiet kinship with, despite not being particularly close. "Steve, I understand more than you might think. We should talk sometime, just you and me." I spent the morning responding thoughtfully to each message, maintaining my position without escalating the emotional temperature. To James, I simply wrote, "I'm sorry Mom is upset. That wasn't my intention. I'm just establishing some necessary boundaries." To Sarah, "I don't resent helping family. I just need the help to be acknowledged and reciprocated when possible." I did not respond to Jennifer at all, deciding that some space was needed before engaging with her wedding funding request. 3 days after sending my message, I received the first test of my new boundary. James called me directly, his voice uncharacteristically friendly. After a few minutes of small talk, he got to the point. "So my car needs a new transmission. The garage says it will cost about $2,000. I was wondering if you could help me out just until my next paycheck." This was a familiar scenario, one that had played out many times before. James would need money for a car repair, I would provide it, and the promised repayment would never materialize. But this time, I was prepared. "I can help you with that," I said, hearing his sigh of relief before I continued. "I will need to send you a formal invoice with repayment terms. I can offer a 6-month payment plan with no interest. Would that work for you?" There was a long pause. "You were serious about that invoice thing?" James finally asked, his tone incredulous. "Yes, I was," I replied calmly. "I am happy to help, but I need formal acknowledgement of the loan and a commitment to repay it." "This is ridiculous, Steve. We are brothers. Are you really going to make me sign something for a simple loan?" "Yes, I am. Those are my terms now." I kept my voice neutral, refusing to be drawn into an argument. James's friendly demeanor evaporated instantly. "Forget it. I will figure something else out." He hung up without saying goodbye. Later that evening, I received a text from my mother. "Your brother had to take the bus to work today because you wouldn't help him with his car. Is that the kind of brother you want to be?" I had anticipated this attempt at manipulation and was ready for it. I offered to help with a formal agreement. He declined. I respect his decision. I then muted notifications from her number for the rest of the night, giving myself permission to disengage from the emotional manipulation. Over the next few weeks, I was surprised to find my relationship with Uncle Bob developing in an unexpected way. Following up on his initial message, we met for coffee at a quiet cafe far from any of our usual family haunts. "I went through something similar with your mother and my other siblings about 10 years ago. He confided after we had settled in with our drinks. "I was always the one they came to for money, never the one they came to for anything else. It took me walking away completely for 2 years before they started to see me as a person again, not just a checkbook." His words validated my experience in a way nothing else had. "How did you handle it?" I asked. "Not as well as you are," he admitted with a wry smile. "I blew up, said a lot of things I regretted. Your approach, setting boundaries clearly without burning bridges, that is smarter." Our conversation lasted for hours, and for the first time, I felt like I truly had an ally in my family, someone who understood what I was going through because he had lived it himself. We began meeting regularly, forming a genuine friendship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. As autumn approached, bringing with it the holiday season, I faced another test of my new boundaries. My mother called to discuss Thanksgiving plans, assuming as always that I would be attending the traditional gathering at my parents' home, and you will be bringing the wine and desserts, right? You know your father loves that bourbon pecan pie you brought last year. In the past, I would have automatically agreed, spending hundreds on high-end wine and ingredients without question. This time, I paused before responding. "I have actually made other plans for Thanksgiving this year. I will be having dinner with friends." The silence that followed was deafening. When my mother finally spoke, her voice was tight with disapproval. "Thanksgiving is for family, Steve. What friends could possibly be more important than your own parents and siblings?" "It is not about importance, Mom. It is about making choices that feel right for me right now. I need some space this holiday season. It was perhaps the most honest I had ever been with her about my emotional needs. "I see," she said, though her tone suggested she did not see at all. "Well, I suppose we will just have to tell everyone you could not make it." "That is fine," I replied, not taking the bait. "I hope you all have a wonderful time." Instead of the traditional family Thanksgiving, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment for Marcus and a few other close friends who, for various reasons, were not spending the holiday with their families. It was relaxed, genuine, and free from the undercurrents of tension that had characterized family gatherings for years. For the first time, I experienced a holiday that left me feeling energized rather than depleted. Throughout this period of transformation, I also found myself making progress in other areas of my life. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Winters, who specialized in family dynamics and helped me understand the patterns that had defined my relationships for so long. With her guidance, I learned to recognize the difference between generosity and martyrdom, between helping and enabling. My career continued to flourish as I redirected energy that had previously been consumed by family drama into creative projects at work. I received another promotion and was asked to lead a major new campaign, a recognition of my growing confidence and focus. I also began dating more seriously, meeting Rachel, a graphic designer whose healthy relationship with her own family showed me what balanced family dynamics could look like. When she invited me to meet her parents after 2 months of dating, I was struck by the warmth of their interaction, the mutual respect, and the absence of scorekeeping that characterized their relationship. As Christmas approached, I declined my family's invitation once again, choosing instead to volunteer at a local shelter on Christmas Eve and spend Christmas Day with Rachel and her family. My mother's disappointed guilt trips had less effect each time, as I grew more confident in my right to make choices based on my own well-being rather than family expectations. By the new year, I had built what felt like a chosen family of supportive friends and new relationships that nourished rather than drained me. The contrast between my old life of constant capitulation and my new life of healthy boundaries could not have been more stark. 1 year after the empty restaurant debacle, I found myself reflecting on the dramatic changes that had reshaped my life. The anniversary might have passed unnoticed had Facebook not helpfully reminded me with a memory notification showing the receipt from Maison Laurent that I had angrily posted and quickly deleted that day. Looking at the date, I was struck by how much had changed, both within me and in my family dynamics. The most significant shift had occurred about 4 months after I established my new boundaries. My mother had called me out of the blue on a Tuesday evening, her voice lacking its usual demanding tone. "Steve, I have been thinking a lot about what happened last year," she began. "I did not handle things well, and I am sorry for that." It was not a perfect apology. She did not specifically acknowledge orchestrating the alternative family gathering or excluding me from it, but it was more accountability than she had ever taken before, and I recognized it as an important first step. "Thank you for saying that, Mom," I responded. "It means a lot to me." Our conversation that night was the most honest we had ever had. I explained how I had felt overlooked and taken for granted for years, particularly when it came to financial support. She listened without interrupting, a rare occurrence, and admitted that the family had fallen into patterns that were not fair to me. "You always seemed so capable, so put together," she said. "I guess we all started to take that for granted." My brother James had taken much longer to come around. For the first 6 months after the incident, he had remained angry and defensive, making snide comments about my invoices whenever we were forced to interact at the few family events I attended. But a surprising shift occurred when he found himself in a tough spot at work, facing a presentation he was not prepared for. Instead of asking for money, he called me for advice, drawing on my marketing expertise. I helped him willingly and thoroughly, spending hours helping him prepare. His gratitude seemed to crack something open between us. "You know," he said awkwardly after his successful presentation, "I always thought you were just showing off with your career stuff, but you are actually really good at what you do." It was a small acknowledgement, but from James, it felt monumental. My sister Sarah had been the first to make genuine amends. About 3 months after the incident, she had shown up at my apartment unannounced, her kids in tow. "I brought these," she said, holding out a folder full of papers. Inside were detailed records of every time I had helped her financially over the years, along with a promissory note outlining a repayment plan for the largest amounts. "I cannot do it all at once," she explained, "but I can do a little each month. It is important to me that you know I value what you have done for us." Her initiative had touched me deeply, not because I was desperate for the money to be repaid, but because it represented a fundamental recognition of me as a person deserving of respect rather than just a convenient resource. Perhaps the most surprising development had been with cousin Jennifer. After my initial silence regarding her wedding funding request, she had sent a scathing email about my selfishness and abandonment of family values. I had not responded, maintaining my distance from the drama. 6 months later, however, she had approached me at a family gathering, pulling me aside for a private conversation. "I want to pay back the money you loaned me for graduate school 3 years ago," she said without preamble. "I always meant to, but it kept being easier not to, and no one else in the family ever seemed to repay their loans to you, so I just followed their lead. That was wrong of me." She had handed me a check for $1,000, the first installment on the $3,000 I had given her. "I will get you the rest in the next couple of months," she promised. What meant even more than the money was the handwritten note that accompanied it. "Thank you for helping me when I needed it. I am sorry it took me so long to acknowledge that gift properly." True to her word, Jennifer had repaid the entire amount by the end of the year, the only family member besides Sarah to voluntarily honor financial obligations without being invoiced. Our relationship had grown stronger as a result, built on a new foundation of mutual respect. 1 year after the painful revelation at the restaurant, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment. I invited only the family members who had shown growth and respect for my boundaries over the past year: my mother, Sarah, and her kids, Jennifer, and Uncle Bob. It was modest compared to the elaborate reunion I had planned the year before, just a simple home-cooked meal in my apartment, but it felt infinitely more authentic. As we sat around my dining table, I was struck by the difference in the quality of our interactions. Conversations were genuine, with people actually listening to each other rather than waiting for their turn to speak. When my recent promotion came up, my mother asked thoughtful questions about my new responsibilities, instead of quickly changing the subject. When Sarah mentioned financial struggles with her kids' school expenses, there was no automatic expectation that I would solve the problem, just an open discussion of possible solutions. The transformation in my personal life had been equally profound. My relationship with Rachel had deepened, and we were discussing moving in together. The friendships I had invested in had flourished, creating a support network that felt more like family than my actual family ever had. I had learned that family could be chosen, built on mutual respect and genuine connection, rather than mere biological ties. My therapy sessions with Dr. Winters had helped me understand that self-respect was not selfishness, that healthy boundaries were not rejection, and that walking away from toxic dynamics did not mean giving up on the possibility of healthy relationships with family members who were willing to grow and change. Most importantly, I had learned that my worth was not tied to what I could provide materially for others or how much I was willing to sacrifice. I deserved basic respect and consideration simply for being a person, not for being useful. This fundamental shift in perspective had transformed every aspect of my life, from my career to my romantic relationship to my friendships. The invoice system that had initially outraged my family had actually improved my relationships with those family members who had come to respect it. When financial matters did arise, they were discussed openly and honestly, with clear expectations on both sides. Loans were documented and repaid, gifts were given freely without ulterior motives, and no one presumed automatic access to my resources. As our small family gathering wound down, Uncle Bob pulled me aside. "I am proud of you," he said simply. "It took courage to change the dynamic. Look at the result, though." He gestured to the room where my mother was genuinely laughing at something Sarah's son had said, a smaller circle, maybe, but a healthier one. I nodded, taking in the scene. "I used to think that family meant accepting whatever treatment you were given because blood ties trumped everything else," I told him. "Now I understand that real family, whether related by blood or by choice, is built on mutual respect and genuine care. The deepest lesson I had learned over this transformative year was that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not to keep giving until you are empty, but to stand firm in your own value and insist on being treated accordingly. My journey had not been about rejecting my family, but about creating the conditions under which genuine relationships could actually flourish, free from the toxicity of entitlement and exploitation. As I looked around at the people gathered in my home, I felt a profound sense of peace. The path to this moment had been painful, but necessary. By standing up for myself that day in the restaurant, by sending that simple message about invoicing all expenses, I had set in motion changes that had ultimately benefited not just me, but those family members who were capable of growth and genuine connection. What do you think you would do in my situation? Would you have the courage to stand up to your family if they were taking advantage of you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life lessons. Sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most meaningful changes in our lives. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, true family is built on respect, not obligation.